morning, everyone. Yes, so welcome. RESTRUCTORING ELISE speaking. Thank you. Welcome to an amazing new week. Yes, and we feel a bit flustered today, right? And it's still so early in the year, and we already feel so involved with so much discussions, right? That is happening in our generation. And one of those important discussions today is our office environment itself. It is that our generation has to learn that there's restructuring taking place, and that restructuring is part of the office environment, yes, and that office environment has become our every person, our every community member, our every part of our generation is in that office and finds themselves in the discussion of the office environment. And therefore, today with HR 2023 office restructuring, our generation and RESTRUCTORING ELISE, right? Office 23, HR 23 really represents our generation, right? The business restructuring of that and RESTRUCTORING ELISE's opinion about what is happening in our generation and about where our generation are required to respond on. And this is going to be our talk on a Monday, yes. And we're starting this week with that discussion that we really want to have our employees that are employed, that is our everyday people, that is everyone around us, right? That finds themselves in a discussion room and being involved in a discussion room. And the office in this context of what we are saying today is the every person, right? That every family reaction. We have had our discussion of family this month, and that's why we are really following with this discussion on the office restructuring, right? How family became the office as well. How the office environment is really an environment of family, and where our people that find themselves employed in business from 9 till 5 p.m. on a Monday till a Friday really has that they find themselves with family, and they have the Saturday off, they have the Sunday off, and 40 hours of that they spend with the office team and in the office, in the workplace, right? And that restructuring is that discussion that our generation currently has, right? That while there's a generation of leaders that are trying to manage a project, and while they're trying to manage a project, they are required to affirm themselves to the every response of our generation. So they can't only now, and they're not only now focused on only team of people that really finds themselves working in the office, but the response really has involved every one of us in every level. Whether we find ourselves employed in a grocery store, we have become the discussion of the office environment of our generation. And therefore, when we listen to how I explain us through a discussion and how we are required to listen to what is really happening around us in our countries, then we are really required to now not get aggressive concerning what is happening in our generation. But we have mentioned before, we have to be in that we learn to know how do we listen to what is happening in our generation. And when we allow ourselves to listen to the discussion in the room, I've mentioned in our discussion previously of family that it is not an argument that our generation is necessarily in. It is a discussion room while a group of leaders has to find their way through managing now not only the office environment that is the business itself, but managing every part of our generation that now looks like everyone is in business environment and everyone is in the business mindset, but our generation are really required to be restructured in a way that is going to be non-abusive to the other, right? Restructuring means that some part of our generation were not really involved with the supply that what's required in our generation. The supply of food, right? The supply of housing, the supply of necessarily requirements that is required in everyone's daily lives, right? And therefore, the group of leaders then found themselves in the discussion room of that. And the discussion room was then misinterpreted somewhere in our generation, right? And in our societies and in our communities. And my opinion on what I have learned concerning the discussion is that it was never meant to be an argument. That is the way it looked now in different countries. It was meant to be a restructuring of the office environment that took place. And the discussion in the discussion room was meant to be in a certain way that it does not exclude the person who's now not really employed in the office, and the person who's maybe only employed in the grocery store, and the person who's unemployed, and the person who needs to receive a government fund. But the office then became every part of our society. And then the team of leaders then tried to manage the project, right? And they then try to include our communities in it, the churches in it, everyone in the discussion room. And then while everyone was in the discussion room, there was the differences between them, right? Because the one was now really involved with the church, but they were now not really the church person in the room. They were really the person that really also has to listen to a different person's perspective, that is maybe a different opinion, that is maybe someone finding themselves in the club life, in the gangster life. And so the discussion then involved all of these team members. And they were then really trying to discuss us through and to really find a way to make it fine for everyone in where our countries found themselves at. And while they were in that season, I really realized that they then learned that this was the differences with this person and this was the differences with this person. Then they came to discuss that was now the differences. It was now not going to be the person is now the perfect pastor, but he might be in business with the church at that time, but he might not want to do that to abuse the church. But it then became part of the discussion room, and someone misinterpreted the situation. Information came out that these people's lifestyle choices are this and this and that. And in the meantime, they were really trying to work out generation through discussion that involved every part of our generation. And then someone misinterpreted what they were busy doing, and someone went around and said the whole world full of chaotic stories of all of what is happening. And now we learned that we found out that there was actually an implementation process they were busy with, and they themselves were busy working through the discussion. They themselves were busy finding a way with discussing and giving their opinions, and they themselves didn't really have what they required to have in the completeness of the conversation, because they were just really discussing the matter. And then in the meantime, they were all really aggressed and abused in the situation, and really all of their personal information really went over social media and all of the things that they tried to do and really didn't try to do, and everyone misinterpreted the whole discussion. And they are then still having to decide whether they are going to continue with that process, because it's really a process that would really benefit our generation in a very respectful way. It is really a process that's not going to abuse countries, and it's really a process that everyone would have to learn to listen to the other in order to sit and to discuss what they really were trying to do. They were really not trying to control the world, or however we thought it was. Really, when I came to the realization of what is really happening, I said, you know what? That is why sometimes we have to learn that we are not in an argument, but they were really trying to have every process minutes in a way that it's gonna be non-abusive to the other. And therefore, we came to this discussion that we really have to learn to listen to the opinion in season that is a restructuring that is happening. That is that, yes, there might sometimes be manipulation in the discussions, and yes, someone might sometimes try to manipulate the situation. And yes, some people might sometimes be firm on their opinion and on what they want around the discussion. And yes, some people were really set on how they live their countries and how they manage their countries. But the discussion in the room was going to be, how is this process going to effectively work for all of our countries? And how are we going to have that the one country is now not going to be in poverty? And you know what? Everyone is going to get what they are required to get. And that's where the group of leaders was really trying to be at in this season, and they were really abused through it. So really, I want to apologize from my side to any of those leaders that really found themselves in their discussion room, that really felt abused by our generation. And I want to say that there's always a way that when there's something happening, we always have to make time to allow ourselves to listen to what is really happening and what is it that someone is really trying to say, rather than us really running with that we really sometimes have to really allow ourselves that time that someone else might interpret what they are doing and you sense it, but then you don't react. Then we learn to take the step back so that we can learn that person's spaces, they wanted to actually explain that, and they were actually meant to say that, but they said it in a different way. And then sometimes there's that can sometimes be manipulation in the discussion. And therefore, with the office restructuring, I want to really focus on our generation's requirement to listen to what the requirement is in season and what is being restructured and the process that they're really trying to implement, but to also understand that no one is gonna also be abused in the discussion that is currently happening, right? So that's where I came in, because I felt somewhat abused in the whole process and the whole discussion that they had. And so I can't really say that I felt paranoid about it. I said that I'm never wrong about what I sense, right? And I'm never wrong about when I give my opinion concerning a certain thing happening around me, right? And when it involves my name, then I'm always gonna be there, listening in, whether I'm there or not there. I sit in my house and I tune in with my ears, and my ears never goes wrong, you know? It is that we sometimes are gonna learn that people are gonna be protective, right? And we are all gonna be protective in a different way. And therefore, I want us to focus today on the restructuring of that office environment that I want to educate them through. But I want them to be non-aggressive to it, but to listen to what my opinion is based on really what they were trying to implement and what our generation really misinterpreted concerning the implementation, and why the misinterpretations really happened concerning the implementation that they've had. And while we are gonna allow ourselves to listen to, when I explain us through this process and I give my opinion, because I've not been involved in the discussions, no. I went based on everyone's social posts in every argument that there is happening and every discussion that I came to know about. And my opinion is based on that specifically, not based on me being involved in the discussions, because everyone knew me, but no one thought to have me involved to get my opinion based on what they were trying to discuss. And I believe that when you get familiar with your people, you know that you don't look at your people's appearances or whatever there is that you try to tell yourself, not this person that you want to listen to. But sometimes when we look at our generation, we make work and we make time to listen to people rather than telling ourselves, I do not want to listen to RESTRUCTORING, I want to listen to that person. And that's where restructuring also comes in, and that's where the manipulation came in, because someone felt that RESTRUCTORING's opinion was not even going to be in their discussion room, and someone else thought but RESTRUCTORING's opinion was going to be constructive, because RESTRUCTORING went exactly through office environment. RESTRUCTORING exactly knows what we are trying to discuss in our season, and RESTRUCTORING's opinion would be constructive on that. And someone else thought that RESTRUCTORING's lifestyle choices that she had years ago might be different and might be hindering to the discussion room. And someone else's opinion in this discussion was, that's now how I realize and how I can sense what is happening around me, right? And someone else's opinion in that sense was that the universe looks like this. There is really abusive, there's manipulation, and there's that we're gonna have to learn that when we are in such a discussion, then we can't tell ourselves that this person's lifestyle choices those years was that, and in these years we might not agree with this person because based on their lifestyle choices 20 years ago, right? And then that was also in the room on who to listen to and what to listen to. And in a season like that, what I want to educate us is that you do not deprive yourself of where you are at in your season, right? what's saying that when you know someone and you are really firm on what you are doing, then you don't argue it away, because the exact problem that we have in our generation is exactly people being abused because they are misinterpreted, because they are manipulated in the whole discussion room, and because they are really deprived of where they're required to be. So most of the countries today find themselves in poverty because they are deprived based on history, things that happened years ago. They were deprived from the discussion room based on where they find themselves at currently. But remember, where countries currently find themselves at, the poverty state that certain countries currently are at, is exactly where we are having to work at, and where we cannot deprive them a day more, because a day longer of deprivation is a day longer that we are in a war discussion, right? So the more we are going to tell ourselves that we want to work around this person, or we want to work around this RESTRUCTORING, or we want to work around this generation of people because they have made me angry and their families did this and this, the more we are going to deprive ourselves, and the more we are going to find ourselves, and our generation is going to find themselves in war arguments, than rather being in the discussion room with where they are required to be at, right? So it is always that we find not a way around things, but we learn to listen to how is it that we need to constructively really manage the process, rather than wanting to manage it in a way that has really manipulated our generation throughout all these years, right? And we can really not point fingers to anyone, because everyone themselves today find themselves in a seat where they were manipulating someone to where they are at, right? And it is that no one's sin today is a secret. But we're really going to have to make a way to look at the situation and to say, the more I deprive someone of giving an opinion to where I'm at, is the more I deprive myself of being where I'm required to be at in my season, right? Is the more time our generation is going to argue about a matter that was never an argument, but there is actually a discussion room. And that is what we want us to really, really, really abide with, the discussion room of it, right? To abide with listening to, this is a discussion room, and really this is not an argumentative room. This is not a finding your way around it room. This is not a your family surname is this and my family's surname is this room. This is RESTRUCTORING, Elise's name is RESTRUCTORING, Elise, and our opinion in this room is constructive based on her history in the office environment, based on her education that happened in person, but not only in person, in spirit and in truth, that had our generation today even having to find themselves in the same discussion rooms that RESTRUCTORING was in the office environment. And then the office discussions was never exactly that, but the strength of the universe and the education of the universe was exactly that. And then RESTRUCTORING's opinion in that day is that I was in the office and not outside of the office. I was invited into the meeting discussions, and it was not even that we discussed that, but it even in this day today looked like our generation's discussion is exactly that. And that's why we do not deprive ourselves of one another's opinions, but we listen to how can we effectively make it work with where we are at. A generation that says that, you know what, we are in a restructuring season. We are required to react, to abide to that. That is really going to be firm and protective and respectful to every country and every individual. And we're really not going to abuse one another, because we are really one family, and we are required to learn that this process can be managed in an effective, in a protective way for everyone, you know, rather than in an abusive way. And that's what we want to also focus on in our discussions during this month. Not during the month, but in the discussion that we start today with HR 2023, because the month is already in the middle of it. Pardon, and we really want to have ourselves focused on that you know what, we are gonna be in this discussion room, and the force of the universe is gonna actually now not prevent the discussion from being there, and not also, humanity is not also gonna always have their own way. Humanity's mindsets always were firm on the little child that I want my way, and I want my way, and I want my way. And the force of the universe is very constructive about, you know what is required and what is respective and what is protective for everyone is that requirement and that implementation that comes like a wind that blows over, and then the wind is like, you know what, we need to have that is gonna be fine for everyone. and that is not going to be abusive to the other. And that is where our generation finds themselves at. It is that we can argue around the discussion. Yes, people listened in 2022 into our people of color discussions, and really leaders were really listening in. And then the whole discussion changed, right? And everyone went on their own opinions about the discussion room of people of color. And everyone really didn't want to listen, because people of color, when you read the heading, people of color, you think they're talking about colored people, right? And then you learn that we're talking about our generation in general, our generation's attitude. When you really listen to the videos, you really learn that people of color, when you read that, you don't go and tell yourself that it now means that. Sometimes when my universe takes you to the page, but my universe says now click and press play and listen to it. Then some people say, oh no, I don't want to listen today because the video's lighting is not right, and all of these excuses that people find themselves to have a way around, right? And my universe is right, educating us exactly in that generation of not wanting to find your way around because the lighting is a bit dark today, and the room doesn't look so professional today, and the office person doesn't look like an office person because he's got a blue jeans on today, It is that exact attitude that you do not want to find your way around, but you listen to the person. The universe, the strength of the universe brought you to it, introduced you to the person. You don't now want to go and tell yourself that the person should now be presented in this way and should now be dressed in this way. And then the universe says that's not even important in your discussion room, right? What is important is that there's a whole generation that's now not going to be dressed up and showing up on every day, right? There's a whole generation that's going to wear sometimes this and sometimes what they want to wear, but their opinions are sometimes going to have to not be disregarded because they're part of our generation. And once we learn to include everyone in the room, then the room would be fine. Then all the countries would have the office team that really needs to manage the countries in a way that the communication goes to one country. That country maybe is the finance who manage up all the countries. There's the country that then educates our generation. They then the educating room, and I really have been educated in my job concerning all of these functions, right? And there's the one country that then educates every country concerning what we can do to assist with employment and with restructuring in our countries. There's the one country that then manages the fundings of countries, right? The fundings of and donations of certain of these countries. And that was really where this group of leaders was meant to be at. But while they were at it, we cannot ignore that they had their own businesses also. And they've really worked hard for their businesses. And people really only required of them now to just now do this and do that and do that. And there was reasons why I've learned that they held onto their monies and to their funds, right? Because they were really in war arguments. And they were really required to hold onto the funds for when they really required the funds. But what we've learned is when they can learn to discuss this matter and to work over their discussion, then even their funds is not going to be required. Because we always say that I did not have funds from June 2022 and I still didn't have an income for my business of work. But it doesn't mean that I can't give my opinion. It doesn't mean that I can't train someone on what they are meant to be trained on. It doesn't mean that I can't go and give my opinion to a country that can educate the leaders on how to effectively lead and how to effectively implement these leadership processes into their businesses so that the employees in the countries and the people in the countries cannot feel deprived of it, but can feel that they are part of the countries, right? And it is there that you say that it's not necessarily your money. No, maybe you have the money. Maybe Rabia required the flight ticket. Maybe she needed to be there to go and educate someone. And that's sometimes why the monies are required. The monies are not required so that someone can now be a billionaire in our generation and so that someone can now be a celebrity on the television. No, this the restructuring sometimes and why the financial assistance are sometimes required is so that someone can sometimes travel to go and educate in a way that people will listen, they would implement, and really you walk a journey with these people. You don't just leave them halfway and you expect them now to find their way through understanding how they can effectively manage their countries and how they can get out of these poverty situations. That is sometimes not scientifically, I've always mentioned that I was not in the science class. I was not in the mathematics class, but it's as simple as 1 + 1 education. It's a simple education of someone assisting someone else or educating someone else in a way that's going to be non-deprived, in a way that's going to be non-abusive, in a way that's going to be non-manipulative, in a way that is fine and welcoming to everyone, and in a way that everyone feels that, you know what, this education, I understand what this person is trying to say. I really learned that this person is really speaking on my level, that this person is really not looking down on me, that this person really didn't travel to my country to take a photo of my poverty lifestyle. The person really didn't now come to my country to make fun of me all these years. You know, all these countries really went through these challenges for years. And they really sometimes want to work with people who's not going to abuse them a little bit further, who's not going to try and deprive them and humiliate them a little bit further. Because what do we do sometimes is sometimes people go and they take a video key and they say the video key and they have a good laugh about it. You know, that's a generation that we still have to educate. You know, you can't laugh at the poverty state of certain people. They have not brought themselves to that situation because of themselves. And sometimes other people even says it to people in poverty, that you have brought yourself there, get yourselves out of it, you'll have the money, you'll have that, you know. But in the meantime, everyone is trying to argue and deprive everyone from educating one another. And the one says that y'all are men and y'all need to be employed, but the other one abuses the men with women and with sending guys, you know, into all of these arguments all the time. So it is that there's restructuring happening. And our generation is a HR2023+BUSINESS ELISE office that really is in the office and that really is listening to the education in season. But no one wants to be deprived while they are listening. No one wants to be abused while someone comes to provide for you, right? No one wants to be manipulated a little day further, and when they leave the country, then they have a good laugh about your poverty state and about where you sit and about what you eat and about what you have on your plate and about the lies walking on your chair and all the nonsense things that they laugh about, because such is our generation. It looks like this, but there is situations, you know, that we can say that honestly these people did not bring upon themselves, that honestly people were really expecting some countries to look like that for generations and generations, and our generation have decided, HR 2023, HR 2022, era 21 have decided that we are not gonna be sitting like that for years, and that when our generation can educate properly, we will do that. If we can travel to really educate properly, we will do that. If we cannot abuse people, we will honestly not abuse people. You know, it is that we say that everyone can have a good laugh about a lot of things, but it depends on what you laugh about. It depends on, you know, how far you laugh along to certain things, you know, and all of that became our leaders, depending on who laughed along. What did they laugh along on TikTok? You know, all those videos of RESTRUCTORING ELISE that went on TikTok. How many of the leaders laughed along? How many of the office team laughed along? Are they laughing along because they are depriving someone? Are they laughing along because they are abusing a generation? Are they laughing along because they went along the abuse of certain countries for some time? And then our generation is gonna have none of that nonsense, you know. We have to be firm about it. We're gonna have none of that that's gonna be laughing along when someone else is abused. And from that abusive room, we get our leaders who's gonna lead all of these projects, and who's really not there to laugh in the offices when certain people are still waiting on the fundings. And then people sit in the offices and they manage the finances based on how they want to manage it. And then they tell RESTRUCTORING ELISE, you know what, RESTRUCTORING, you sit there in the corner, we manage the offices. And then the RESTRUCTORING ELISE says, you know what, there's social media. These leaders knew that they had to implement social media, because on the day that you'll keep the funds there for yourselves and you'll know the funds have to be at all of these countries, then we are even not going to be abused by that. You'll know the education has to be in all of these countries, then we are not going to be abused by that. We are also not going to argue about it. But the only thing we are going to say is that we need proper leaders who's not going to abuse the situation any further. And that's where office restructuring are happening in our season, and it's required to happen. And we're not going to get arrogant about the situation, and we're not going to start another argument about it, because it is a discussion. And if the officers are managed in such a way that these educators hold on to the finances in the offices, so that the other countries cannot now get the education that they're required, and they can now not get the fundings that they're required, and they cannot now get out of the poverty situations that they're in, then we're going to make a constructive decision based based on the teams of office people in the offices currently that are leading all of these projects, right? The television programs, all of the programs that really educates in our generation, that are really depriving our countries a little bit more, that really needs to be educated on how to not be abusive in a situation in our generation that's already so much abusive, right? We are gonna really be firm in the discussion room concerning those discussions, and that no one else is gonna feel any more abused or any more deprived or any more manipulated on where they are required to be at. And that is where office restructuring during this discussion room, and on these Mondays, we're going to focus on all of these discussions. There's going to be a Monday that I'm only going to focus on the offices, because I only want to focus really on the offices, because there's a lot that I've learned with working in human resources, with being employed. Yes, I've been employed in human resources for almost 9 years, yes, and with my 9-10 years experience, I can really say the education, yes, I did at Boland College, and when I really learned about the office environment, I learned about how they can manage, our general countries in a way that every country are managed properly, and how they can really, without arrogance, without looking at skin color, because in the office that I was working at Niblibits, I can really tell you that really there was a lot of Europeans, but it was not about skin color. It was not about white and black in those offices. To some people, they felt like it was like that, but this RESTRUCTORING can affirm with that and say that honestly, there was honest discussions, there was discussions that was really truthful, there was discussions that was non-abusive, there was, yes, those type of managers that wanted to have their own way, but there was really their times that they really cannot argue with the force of the universe that was in the room, that was themselves, and then I had a good laugh about it, because then they had that time to be human about it, and that is so important in our season. It is that the managers at Niblibits those years, they couldn't even argue themselves out of the room because they were just human. And that is where our generation sometimes need to be at. It is, yes, we have learned to only sometimes think about ourselves, and we sometimes want to do things the way we are used to, and we sometimes want to find our way through having it the way it looked right to us for years. But we also have to learn that, being human in your office environment is the best, the best restructuring that you can get in an office environment. Being human to me means you look at the whole team, you learn to listen differently, you learn to make time to listen, because sometimes in those meetings at Niblibits, when they said, RESTRUCTORING, okay, now you can join the meeting, then I'm like, you know what, I don't even know what to say and what y'all are talking about, because y'all are talking science class and mathematical class here with y'all's high words in the management meeting. But anyway, then I attended the meetings, and then sometimes the force of the universe said, RESTRUCTORING, it's now time for you to ask a question. Then I'm like fighting with myself, what am I gonna ask? What am I even gonna say? I don't even know what they're talking about. But such was the education, and sometimes I really had to find it within myself to really listen to what really I want to say, and what really was discussed, and what was required to be my opinion in season. It is that you know that you are never dumb. No, and you are never black in the room, and the room is every human, and such was Niblibits really with that team. I really, really admire the Niblibits team. They are the best team that I've worked with. The leadership that's required in our generation is exactly the Niblibits team. That was really, those years I started in 2011 at Niblibits, and I worked there almost 4 years, and it was really the education that's required in our generation in this season, and they really managed the whole process in that way. And therefore, what we are saying is that while our leaders in this season are restructuring offices, we really need to learn why the office environment, why the office teams need to sometimes learn certain projects internationally, why certain offices really are required, because the force of the universe brought us to the office room, not for any reason, no, because the office environment with the political leadership, those education really goes hand in hand. It's that you call a 1+1 fact in our generation, that really has all of these functions that we are required to have right in our countries. That is the education that really happens in office. There is not an education that's now a daily job, and it was now only for 4 years a job, or for 3 years a job, and it was only from 2011 until 2014, or all of those discussions. But it is really part of the universe, and it really happens in that way, and it's part of the process, and it's really even being implemented. And those leaders, even when our governmental leaders needs to to learn who their leaders are that lead certain projects, then they should really affirm themselves with learning what the leadership in certain offices were and how certain offices were leading certain projects, right? And that is where we also want to focus on when we focus on the office discussion of the business restructuring of our generation, really how to implement those office leadership into political leaders discussions when countries really needs to deal with situations that really involves leadership, that really looks like the whole generation is an office environment, but it's also a family, but it's also providing for people to be employed and also financial assistance, and also that requirement for someone to be fine and protected with where they are at. And such is the education that I have received in my HR human resources experience. And such is what I'm gonna really discuss our generation through during this season with HR23, the business restructuring, and RESTRUCTORING ELISE. And that is very, very important. Thank you for joining the discussion. Thank you. And that is very important with where we are at. Another thing that I want to focus on with our discussion today is familiarization in that environment itself, right? It is that when you find yourself that this is your employment and this is where you are currently employed, or this is where our generation is currently at in the discussion room, how to your familiarization in that environment, right? Your familiarization is now gonna be that people say that for your in the interview room, one of the first questions people normally say is that what is gonna be your first 10 days in the role, right? In the position. It is that familiarization that in the HR, in the human resources discussion, they don't only want that answer based on you finding your way through words, right? The 1,000 words on a resume, right? It is not that the 1,000 words on a resume is going to really have you really be fine with where you are at, with what you're required to do in the office environment. It is that familiarization with how do you sense in that interview room that they discuss that is the exact you, that is the exact person or the exact candidate for this position or for the role or for whatever the discussion in our generation is, right? It is that familiarization with community work, with people work, especially when you in a human resources interview or applying for a human resources position, right? It is that familiarization that you familiarize yourself with what is happening in our generation, what is really the requirement or what is happening in your country. It's when a political leader really starts a job also and starts a position where he really has to be familiar with the requirement of him in that he is the leader of the country, but what's the requirement of the country. So normally when people go and apply for a role that is a political leader role, they normally are familiar with why they would want to apply, right? They normally are familiar with the environment themselves, with the country themselves, with the challenges of the country themselves, with how their personalities or how their work history or how their educational background can be that is the requirement, that is that implementation in the generation in the current season that is at. That is where everyone says that you can't only employ a political leader based on his education, right? You cannot only employ a political leader based on an argument in our generation. You cannot only employ a political leader based on the fact that he has been part of a team and he understands the process. Sometimes and especially with the restructuring in our generation, our exact political leaders would be exact people who would be exact and familiar with the requirement in the country, rather than being a part of the team for years, or rather than being the educated person in the room, rather than being the person who would know how to present themselves on their day, rather than being the person who really were now part of the discussion all these years, rather than being the type of leader that was really part of the argument. Our generation's choice in leadership in our season and in our generation specifically would have to be familiarizing themselves with the requirement of that specific role, that specific position, that specific title, job title, that is the real requirement of our, not only our country in general, because really our countries are really international also. So our type of leaders would have to understand the international restructuring that is happening, right? The international requirement to respond to our generations requirement to be protected with where they are at, right? Our generation's requirement to be out of that they used to be deprived of, right? The arguments that were sometimes in-house, that were sometimes unnecessary, that is sometimes generational arguments, that our generation said, you know what, we are not here to argue generational arguments. We are out of apartheid, we are out of arguing this, we are out of arguing about that. We are in the currentness of our generation, and our leaders need to be listening to what is their requirement for being a leader in the country in this season. And that is HR 2023 and our office restructuring when it comes to political leadership. And with political leadership, we are going to focus on the mistakes. We are going to, in these discussions on a Monday, focus also on the mistakes that our political leaders have made. But really, our political leaders really having themselves in that they listen to, why do I have to apply for the political leader role, right? Why am I really applying? And our people that really respond to those applications really find themselves in that they are familiar with the requirement of the country and of the international generation in general. And with accepting our international generation, we're going to also focus on that, because our generation really requires acceptance. Not only because of RESTRUCTORING ELISE. No, I've mentioned before when we started our people of color discussion, yes, Mama Anna gave birth to 7 children. Yes, our generation have changed. Yes, there's LGBTQ in our discussions and in our managers and in our offices. And our leaders in our discussion room that manages these projects really need to be acceptive. I've mentioned in my people of color discussion in 2021, acceptive means, yes, you accept, but you are not gonna disregard it. Yes, RESTRUCTORING ELISE translated for yourself, for herself in that way. Accept, I accept, I am acceptive to that XYZ. I don't XYZ it out. I say RESTRUCTORING ELISE vocabulary, and I always say, don't tell RESTRUCTORING ELISE that I'm speaking wrong, because I'm never wrong with what I'm saying. But listen to what I'm saying when I'm saying something, right? Acceptive to that XY, that in acceptive to that there is not gonna be XYZ out. You know, with XYZ, so many things out in our generation that RESTRUCTORING says you need to be acceptive to that. There is you in the discussion room. That are what you are familiar with, that are non-abusive to you as a person and non-abusive to our generation in general, rather than quieting people out and saying, oh, RESTRUCTORING, you said the word wrong. RESTRUCTORING says, no, I'm not wrong. You listen to what I'm saying. And even if I'm wrong, you still listen to what I'm saying. And that is important in our generation. Acceptive, yes, acceptive. You are accepting where you are at, with where you are at in your season, but you are adapting. Yes, you go to the D, A, B, C, D, not by the X. Thank you very much. So you are adaptive to that environment. You adapt to the environment. You get familiar with the environment that is required of you. You are acceptive to it. You are not gonna only accept everything that everyone requires you to do in your job, because you've been part of the discussions, because you've been part of the, arguments in the house and part of the generational arguments, and then you come into a leadership room of leading a country or international country, and then the only thing people sometimes want to do is they want to be acceptive to that wants to accept them, and they say, oh, that person voted for me, they accept me. That person voted for me, they accept me. No, acceptive to yourself, XYZ, that XYZ drunkenness is there in the room, and you adapt to that environment. That is familiarization with what is required for you to do in the office that you are at in your season, and with what you are required to do. So that is part of familiarization in specifically with political leaders, right? And I'm really gonna focus on this just in our discussion now, because I really want us to listen to what I really want to say about acceptive. Because remember, we started the year 2022 with attentiveness, assertiveness, awakeness, awareness, right? And in that environment of familiarization, let's find ourselves in that. Thank you. And people of color discussion, yes, we're referring to people of color discussion. For those of you, because people really listen to and really work on my discussions based on what I've discussed last year this time, right? Or based on my previous people of color discussions that we had in 2022. So attentiveness, assertiveness, awakeness, and the awareness of sometimes people are starting a role in political leadership and they are being threatened right in the role. So that's the awareness part that we really were focused on and that we really were discussing. So assertive and the assertiveness of it, right? Assertive in that context of what we are saying is the familiarization part. The fact that you adapt to the environment, right? You get familiar with what's required of you in the leadership role. And when you are familiar with that requirement of you to lead in your country, right? You familiarize yourself with what is this leadership office environment like, right? And when you are adaptive to that, you adapt, you assertive to that, you get familiar with it, then you find yourself to listen to what is gonna be that is gonna be acceptable to you, that you're gonna hold on to, but that you're also gonna sometimes release and say that this environment to me sounds like maybe they planned for me to be the leader, maybe they planned for me to be in this role, maybe they planned for me to be here because they had their own reasons, and then you are acceptive to what is fine with you and what is not fine with you. You release and you do not really be part of that part of the leadership in the leadership room. In saying that, in that response, you would be assertive to the discussions. You would be attentive to what is happening around you. You will be awakened in your decisions concerning what you are required to make concerning the country. And you would be aware of everyone else's requirement for you to respond, right? That awareness that sometimes are the danger signs, that sometimes our people are angry, and people sometimes put you in a role because they're busy with other discussions in our generation, and they sometimes don't explain it to you, and they sometimes get you into the role, and after some time you learn, oh, they planned this on me, and then you learn, okay, this is what's happening. And people sometimes in those leadership, in that type of leadership, sometimes stays in the countries in political leadership, and they sometimes get angry, and then they sometimes want to abuse the country because of it, because they then think that the whole country is involved in all of those ways of leadership. But we have learned that our countries are, that the universe is vast, yes, a lot of things happening, and with a lot of things happening, not everyone is going to be against you with being a leader in a country. Not everyone has planned on you to be there. Not everyone were ever involved in these discussions. Not everyone is ever fighting the other household next door. Not every country, not everyone goes along with the 50% people that have a financial support and 50% of the country that's in poverty. Not everyone is really for that type of generation, you know. And you work with your people in general to educate people out of that mindset that really wants to sometimes only find themselves in that 50% of generation in poverty and 50% of generation that are really privileged with where they are at. You sometimes make work in your leadership role with understanding, with getting familiar with what are you intended to do in the office environment, rather than you doing what someone else requires you to do. And in that role, you familiarize yourself with the functions of a vote that says, attentiveness, receptiveness, assertiveness, attentiveness, awokeness, and awareness. You focus on those functions. You educate yourself with how does evoke explain it in your situation, because those are functions, 5 functions that you can explain in different ways and in different environments and in different circumstances in life. You can implement those 5 functions and you can really make it work for you with finding your way within leadership. Especially you understand what is that acceptiveness, assertiveness, awokeness, attentiveness, awareness means to you, how to implement it, how to manage your office in that type of office ways of work. Yes, when I worked at Nibbly Bits, they have the 5 ways of work. That was your 5 whys, right? And in RESTRUCTORING ELISE's awoke business, awoken business, yes, awoken purpose mindset, and our HR requirement in the office restructuring our generation is the RESTRUCTORING ELISE's process is your acceptiveness, assertiveness, attentiveness, awokeness, awareness, adaptiveness. You know what is fine with you, what is not fine with you, what you need to be conscious about, what you need to be attentive about, what you need to listen to, how you need to listen to discussions, how to get familiar with where you are at, with what you are required to do, how to not exclude yourself out of the discussion rooms and out of the meetings, and how to not even abuse yourself while you are in the meetings, but how to not be manipulated by a process that seems right to other leaders. And now you are in the leadership role, and now they require you to respond and to be the leader, and now people tell you that you can't speak and that you can't that and you can't that, and you sit and you listen and you learn that they even give you an opportunity to speak, but then they tell you that you can't speak. They even give you an opportunity so that they can listen to you, and then they tell you that they don't even want to listen to you, and then you exclude them out of your whole way and mindset of familiarizing yourself. But you don't completely exclude them, but you listen to what is your requirement in that is your leadership role, with where you find yourself at in your country, or with what the country are really being challenged with. And that is familiarization in the office restructuring. And that is where we want to focus on with our discussion. With saying that, you would then want to focus on our generation's requirement to then have to learn to abide to the restructuring, right? Why I say that? Because if you are going to focus on the leaders in the office, then you're going to be whole time distracted on what's required for you in your job, or with where you are at in your daily job, or in your leadership, or in your political leadership role. Then you are the whole time going to be distracted, right? So you're going to want to respond with that. That is what is our generation's requirement. When you are responding with that type of familiarization, so you familiarize yourself with what would then be that your country would want you to abide to. And your country normally doesn't realize the discussions that happens in the offices. So your country is really voting for that leader, and that leader is the best leader, and they are the best team. And people really doesn't realize what is happening around them until they really realize sometimes what is happening around them. And we don't want to have that. That RESTRUCTORING drove in the red car into the Parelzig guy and Parelzig corner in South Africa in the white car, because the next drive into the white car is gonna be a harsher driving. The first driving was a bit softer, but the requirement is, I always say, when you explain something to me, explain it to me right, because I don't want to drive into you with my red car and then I cause an accident, and then I don't have driver's license, but I can drive, and then there was a problem with the car, but there was not a problem with the car, and I had to get to the office earlier that morning because I was newly employed and my child had to get to school, and my financial circumstances and my whole story about it then became my drive into you, and I don't realize, because I myself really didn't realize the car's gonna go that route, and I really didn't realize that you were in my way, and you were really not only in my way on that accident, but in the universe you were there and I was there. And that is our restructuring also, that we're gonna sometimes have to learn to take a step back Because if Rabia maybe has traveled a bit earlier that morning, it would have been different. If Rabia maybe didn't wake up late because she was a bit sleepy, because maybe she was up the night before that, Rabia had a whole family, and Rabia was excited because my brother's children are going to school, and we are all excited because they sometimes are deprived of an education, and now we are all excited and we are all in the car, and the car can't drive properly because the finances is really sometimes not properly there for the car to drive properly. And then that whole situation of that could have been prevented because the guy on the stop street could have taken a step back, and he could have really allowed some space there so that when I take the turn on the corner, on Parozig corner, and I was late and he was late and everyone was chaotic because it's an early morning to school and I have to be at the office because it's a new job, and the children had to be at the school, and the car had to be full because someone said unto Rabia, we don't also want to walk to the school, can we also get into the car because the school is very far and we also go to that same school. And that whole communication is that can sometimes require us to be familiar with why don't you always have to listen to that person and to what other people want, but being familiar with your environment itself. Because that whole communication line is exactly the restructuring in our generation, is exactly that was only a part of Zig corner, and that was only a red car driving into a white car, and that was only a guy that was on the stop street and he was a few centimeters meant to be away from the stop street, and that was only Rabia taking the turn at that time, but that was every force of the universe that requires us to sometimes learn to take a step back, right? To sometimes learn not to be abusive to the other, to sometimes learn that even though the process is like this, and even though parliamentary leaders lead the country in this way, and even though political leaders are aggressive with one another, if we in the offices can sometimes take a step back with not being in aggression, with not being in arguments, with not being aggressive to what we do not understand happening around us, and we learn sometimes to take the step back, then you know what, the next time the Parozig guy and Auntie Rabia is somewhere in the universe at the same time, that they don't realize it because they can't sense that they are there, but such is the structure of the universe, then none of them have to drive into the other because people are busy restructuring, and there's a lot of people that has to, our daily lives goes on, we have to be there, it's our daily jobs, and that accident, sometimes the force of that can sometimes be either harsher, or if everyone learns to take a step back and to be non-aggressive in circumstances like that, that we learn that such is our generation and that such is this universe, then no one would be abusing no situation, and everyone would be where they're required to be. In that there is a protective environment, there is that no one was actually against no one, but everyone was actually in a universal discussion room, and that sometimes the communication was a bit different, sometimes the environment was a bit challenged, sometimes the situation is a bit different, sometimes the storyline of the family is a bit different, and someone else runs out and wants to rewrite and wants to give their opinion. Malvina says rewrite the script, and all of these communications that sometimes went to Malvina them's house. I don't know why I have to mention it the whole time, but it has happened, right? And all of these communications that came to the celebrity house, and Malvina them's father was a pastor, and they found themselves involved in all of these discussions when they are really not meant to be there or meant to be rude to anyone. And then we learn that all of these ways are really sometimes non-aggression, but really our generation finds themselves in this season, and sometimes it is abusive, and sometimes we have to be protective about ourselves, and sometimes we don't want to be abused and manipulated, and we are firm about it, and sometimes the force of the universe is even firm about it in saying that we know what, y'all have grown up together, but the way that the force of this universe is a bit differently restructured, and y'all are going to learn to protect yourselves in a way that sometimes other people are not going to agree with, but in a way that you're going to have to learn that someone's going to learn to take a step back, someone's going to learn to not abuse the other, someone's going to learn to not get aggressive, someone's going to learn to not abuse a situation, someone's going to learn to say that you know what, I'm gonna not now just agree with it because people want me to agree with it because it was the process years ago, and Malvina them's surname is Mbabani, and my family's surname is Mbatani, and my church pastor's family surname is Mbamani, and they all come from Africa, and none of us know what the story is. We haven't even been explained if they were fighting or what. Maybe Malvina them know the story. We don't know the story. America sees the information, how America knows the information about Africa, and why we all are having almost the same surnames, And then Mama Anna said, but the surnames mean the land that everyone was living on and that everyone was from. And now all of us is in argument or not in argument, and we don't understand what is happening and protecting ourselves in all of these ways. But we all have to learn to sometimes take a step back, because we are honestly sometimes non-aggressive, and South Africa has been tuned in and enjoying the whole scene of it, about the Mbamanis and the Mbatanis and the Mbabanis and the Africanism of it, and everyone is angry, and everyone said, y'all travel back to Africa and y'all go sort your nonsense out. And then we said, but who started here first, and who was in South Africa first? And no one was actually arguing, but we were actually learning to just now understand that we are in a restructuring of our generation, and these things happened years ago, and we don't know who really has got the information of what happened, but we are really now not all the time going to want to be in those discussions, because none of us know what they're discussing. None of us know. Our families didn't disclose information. They're just there managing the situation, and we understand that everyone knows what they're doing, but they are really now honestly not gonna the whole time have Rabia angry and tuned in, because now Malvina posted this, and now this one did this, and now that one did that. And then Rabia said, and that day I get very angry, and I do not care, because every one of us get angry, but no one is gonna honestly be unprotected on that day. And everyone is gonna honestly want to protect themselves on that day, because none of us know what y'all are discussing. And such is those communications, that is those attentivenesses, assertivenesses, awakenesses and awokenesses and awarenesses, that we honestly, no one negotiates about. None of us is dumb, but no one is going to be in no one's way on that day, because while I'm educating, I really do not want to be distracted the whole time with what I'm doing. I really do not want, when I given in an education, my education to be manipulated and to go another way when I'm really busy educating people that are really listening in, and that has really been listening into my education all these years, right? And then all of those discussions and things really had us be sometimes in aggression with one another, and we were really not in aggression, because then the spirit changes, and then the whole environment changes, and then no one is aggressive anymore. So we have to learn to sometimes know when to take a step back, so that all these environments don't rush our generation into what Rabia calls as a parallel zig moment, that can sometimes be the red car, the white car, and the step back situation, that can sometimes be prevented, because the way that we have to lead our officers should also be that is going to be protective to all of these discussions that is also in our generation happening. And yes, America knows about the rooms and the discussions, but they have not disclosed it with everyone. They do not tell us what Mamani and Mbabani means and where they are at with that communication. And we're really not going to want to know the whole time from them. But we really sometimes just want to go on with our daily lives, rather than wanting to the whole time focus on the discussion that is now that in the room. And then they say on a Monday, that's the discussion, and on a Tuesday, that's the discussion. And then Rubia says, I do not care, because you all have not explained yourselves to me. You all have not communicated to me on self. I do not know what you're on about all of these Mamanis and Mbabanis and Mbatanis, and I do not really want to now discuss that. But when you can discuss it, I listen to y'all, I watch the films, I listen to what y'all are telling me on the films. But other than that, our generation really does not want to be abused the one by the other, and that is just how it is. With not only our challenges, but also the challenges with our apartheid and the white people that really doesn't want to fight anymore. No, why? Because the white people went to marry non-white women, and they're fine in their marriages, and they really don't want to argue about all of those things. So we're going to have to find a way to really discuss and really educate our generation through the challenges of the restructuring that is happening in our generation. And while we are in that education room, we are going to have to learn that such is the Mbatanis and the Mbabanis and the Mbamani story, is that we are all family. But not all family. Our families is all from Africa, yes. But what it means is our generation, our education in this generation is that our generation is all family. And there's going to be disagreements in the room, and the one is going to wear pink and the other one is going to want to wear pink. And we're going to have to learn to not argue about it, because such is our generation. And if there's argument concerning it, then we're going to have to learn to take a step back and to be protective, so that the one doesn't abuse the other one in the whole discussion of it. Because other people learn that this is the story, and now some people might want to manipulate our whole family communications, and some people are just onto manipulating situations in how it can sometimes benefit them. And therefore, we are really going to have to learn to be familiar with our education as families, to our generation that is our African house that looks like everyone looks from Africa, and everyone's surname sounds the same, and everyone might came with the argument or not with the argument, or everyone might be working together or not working together, but we are all family in this generation. We are intermarrying, and we're going to have to get over the argument side of it and learn that it is a discussion. Like I said, the Chinese, the Japanese, the North Koreans, the South Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Philippines, the Taiwanese, that all of them are family. Singaporeans, yes, the Singaporeans also looks like them. They are all family, and they're gonna sometimes learn to listen to one another and to not be so aggressive, so fast-paced aggressive, because it's sometimes only a discussion. And sometimes the force of the universe's discussion is that the process of the universe is the red car drove into the white car. The accident was the guy's door was harmed, but the guy's mindset was, REBEA, the accident could have been worse. And REBEA's mindset was, but I was late for work, and I was waking up late, and everyone wanted the love to school, and no one wants to have no one walk that road because it was a very far road to walk to school. And I was excited about our boys finally getting a place in the school, and our boys was excited to go to school, and it was a whole morning, but no one was actually arguing. But the process of the universe works like that. If we find ourselves in that process that someone now wants to go investigate that accident, and the next time it's not an accident, but it's something harsher happening. Why? Because someone now went to go and investigate and went to take that a little bit step further, and that step further is now not a drive into a doorway, but it's now something else happening. And that's where REBEA ELISE, that's where we learn to take the step back as a generation, because we were never actually arguing. We were all just in this, that is a communication room, that is part of our every reaction, that sometimes requires us to learn to listen in that way that is going to be non-offensive or non-abusive, and that is going to be protective to everyone, because we are one family in a generation. And our restructuring that is happening, our office restructuring, is exactly that is happening. So everyone is trying to work, yes, on the pace of the cars that are driving. The traffic department person was also there that morning, yes, and I didn't even have driver's license. That same traffic department person failed me twice already for my driver's license, and that morning I had to drive myself, yes. And he failed me in Paarl, he failed me in Wellington. We don't know. The communication might have been, REBEA is going to be there, and she's driving that time of the morning, and she's driving that type of car. And none of them knew that the generational argument is actually the poverty state of our generation, and the people receiving $50,000 a month salary, you know. And we all didn't know that that was the discussion in our generation in that morning. And people were busy fighting with REBEA. And maybe they were in communication, or maybe they were not in communication. And it was never an argument, because it was an office restructuring. That the time and the pace that people are driving out just need to be at a different time. The education from the traffic department just needs to be for those people who do not drive cars and who do not have driver's licenses, and might have tried 2 times for their driver's license, and they might have failed because of a manipulation system, or they might have failed just because someone that's not fine with the situation and the communication about REBEA ELISE that really hit the traffic department's ears now for quite some time. And the traffic department said, because of all these communications, I'm not giving you a driver's license because I don't understand the communication happening. And you know, all of that is an office restructuring that can sometimes be manipulated, that can sometimes be abused, that can sometimes be that we don't force our way through driving on the roads. No, but sometimes you as a person know when you are fine with where you're at. And if the other people around you learn that this is the situation, then my advice to that situation is, do not then go and abuse that leader, do not go and abuse the situation, but rather take a step back. And if you learn that there's so much communication concerning this family, and you do not know the communication, rather do not react about it. Do not get aggressive concerning your community people, you know, and rather allow yourself to be on that is a slow pace, that is your own pace, with understanding and with listening to what is really happening concerning our generation and in our countries, right? Because it was actually maybe a restructuring that's happening in the traffic department, and they are busy doing their jobs, and the guys getting the cars that are broken off the roads, and it was that whole that whole communication. But it was not only that in actual fact, it was actually an international communication also. That is restructuring our office environment, our processes, our cars on the roads, and the times that the cars can be on the road, and the slow pace that the cars need to drive on the road, and then of our pace as when because we have now not only learned that the television goes off and the cell phone alarm goes off. No, it is that we act based on a cell phone computer program, and we wake up exactly in that mindset. And therefore, our generation also needs to learn to take a step back, because technology has increased, and technology requires us to learn that this technology is now part of the brain function of the human being. And the human being therefore needs to learn that we are now not going to be aggressive, that we are now not in argument, that we are now not fighting one another, but the process has now changed, and we have now really, the restructuring now is now not only in the office environment, but every part of our generation's reaction. And that's also where we want us to be at with the office restructuring discussion during this month. And that is part of familiarization. And when the political leader now listens to that example that I'm giving, but it's not an example, it really happened in my life, and it's really my opinion on what happened. And the political leader really gets familiar with what happened in the situation, and he finds himself with all of these informations. And the way Rabia explains it is that there's no stop there. There's just like, you just go with the words. And then that is the same that happens in the political leader's day, that the political leader then decides how he listens to everyone's opinion about him, the whole country requiring him to lead the country, the whole country requiring him to react on that, and everyone just wants their own opinions. And when Rabia explains it, and when Rabia puts a full stop there, then honestly, it's either a full stop or it's either a red car and a white car for a political leader in a country. And when your situation is like that, then every political leader needs to learn to take a step back, to not react, to not get angry, to not just go along with what everyone wants them to do, but to listen to what are they familiar with and what do they feel fine with concerning the office restructuring of our generation. And we are not going to leave the political leaders halfway. No. People always say, when you explain again to us that. So what we are really going to try to do is we're really going to try to explain this again, a political leader function. We're going to really explain again thoroughly, and not explain it again, but we're going to completely explain what we are trying to say about the political leaders in the office restructuring of our generation. So when we find ourselves in that is our political leader in the restructuring of it, we're going to want to educate our political leaders, and we're going to make time for that, because what we want to do is we want to educate our political leaders through the whole process of it, right? We want to educate our political leaders through the whole function of leadership in that way, through the whole function and process of how we require our political leaders to really find way with leading in what is the requirement of the countries, or what's Rabia's opinion. When you start a leadership role, what would be your requirements to really focus on when you really start a leadership role? First, Rabia focuses on the familiarization process. That really includes that is family, that your role is that this country that you lead is family, that you do not tell yourself that this is not family and this is just a job, and this person looks different than me, and this person's skin color is different than me, and this person is from a different family line, and this person has been busy with this and this, corruption and this, and from mafia life and this, because you know what, such is our generation. That is going to be anyone in our generation that might be the mafia, that might be a different skin color, that might be this, that might be that family. And when our leaders lead the office, familiarization is make it family to you. adapt to that you feel fine with, do not feel abusive to it, but be like that you would be to your own family member. And that is where we want our countries to be at, because people in the poverty state are the countries that are in the poverty state in this season. They are really not going to be non-negotiable anymore. They really want to get out of that guys has been really abused a lot, guys has been really on drugs a lot, and has been really abused in our generation a lot. And all of those arguments is really not that difficult to work through, right? It is a process that it's a function that I will really want to educate our leaders with. And that's why I say, when you really want to contact me on my email and really want to have me discuss this process with you, I will really educate you through how to manage the process effectively and protectively in your countries, rather than finding a way around the process the whole time, or rather than only focusing on a certain part of your country, when the generation's requirement is to really allow everyone in every part of the country to be really fine with where they are required to be at financially, housing, subsidize what they need to have the funding rooms, the funding projects in our communities. South Africa has tried a lot of different parts of that project, but I think South Africa's understanding is that they want to manage the project on a community level, but for RESTRUCTORING, ELISE, the community level of managing those projects is not fine. For RESTRUCTORING, ELISE, those projects that is called, in South Africa, it's called the NGO project. Part of the projects that they have implemented, that is now the food banks and the funding schemes of it, is really managed in a community level of it. But RESTRUCTORING's mindset is that those functions needs to be governmentally led, because we don't need our countries to be all over the place. Because if one community has a registered NGO and another community doesn't have it, where does it have our country be at? If one country has that is now not going to be necessarily a community-led NGO program, because RESTRUCTORING is not going to agree with that all the time. No, why not? Because people that has $50,000 a month and 50,000 rand income a month, and someone else living on a funding scheme, I'm not agreeing with that totally. So I would want to educate leaders through that project, and through why I would not just adhere to that. That is fine for 100 time, yes, but that is not where we want our countries to be at, and to feel that it's fine to deprive the other while someone else has 50,000 rand a month, and then they're driving 3 cars, and then they have how many houses in one country while half of the country leads from a funding scheme. I do not agree with that process, and I really, if you want me to educate you through that, then really South African government, I'm really fine to work with. Yes, don't call me on the computers like you all do in my house with all of these radio kiss things that you all nowadays do. Don't do that. Contact me in person, by email. Do that, follow that process, and I will educate you all properly through that, because it's very required. The proper education of it is very required. And I can honestly not have you all manipulate your countries any further with wanting to do things the way certain people want you all to do it. I'm non-negotiable about it, and I want to explain also, when I want to educate you all through that. Sorry, my husband's gonna open the door, he's just busy working. But what I want to do also is that when y'all are really gonna find yourselves through understanding the different businesses that's in our countries, and the different business owners and their requirements for their businesses. That's one function that I want to educate everyone through. And for these educations, I am really not going to educate you on a people of color talk through that. You can contact me, yes. You can find a way to understand how the process can be managed properly, and how no one can be in argument about it. There's certain things that I discuss in my discussion room on people of color, and there's certain things that we all can really follow the correct process, rather than being those NGOs I call all over the place. A little dot here, a little bit there, a little feed there, a little food there, a little bit here, and the half of the country is still arguing and abused and manipulated in some season. We're not gonna really, that's not where we want to be at. We want to be at that if you can do it properly, then do that properly, then manage the whole process properly, rather than being abusive and having already been through so much abuse, and then still trying to be abusive is not gonna be fine with RESTRUCTORING, ELISE. So that's where I want to really focus on with our political leadership. And then with the office restructuring that I've mentioned, that I want to have our discussion complete today, with today's discussion is, our business owners and the businesses currently in our countries, right? And the argument that's currently happening in our countries. What I do not want in general is I really do not want anyone who work in a business who's managing or who's CEO of an international business owner, and then that international business owner currently finds themselves maybe in discussion or in argument because of whatever happened in our generation, and now everyone wants to now go and steal from the business owner, and now people are employed in these businesses and they are constantly sending messages to be against their own companies that they're working for. I want to educate our generation through that in our office restructuring part of the education of this. But what I want to tell everyone today is, while you learn that this is the situation internationally, and these business owners maybe have funded for their businesses to be set up in countries, and the businesses are in the countries at this time, and they are finding themselves in arguments with other international countries, then what I want for those CEOs and business owners is to not manipulate for CEOs and managers in those businesses, is to not manipulate the business owners in this season concerning their discussion in the room. What I want you all to do is to not send abusive messages concerning the business around, to not be going to deprive the businesses around, and to argue with those business owners. And even though you learn that this is the business owner and he owns the business, don't go and argue with them. Don't go and get involved with discussions and arguments concerning these business owners, because what RESTRUCTORING ELISE wants to have everyone understand, and I've really recorded it in this weekend, is that the business owners are really not going to want to now honestly fight and argue the whole time, and then you all are employed by them, and then in circumstances like this, what does people normally do? They normally go and steal the funds of the businesses, and they normally try to manipulate and be arrogant in the situation the whole time. And what does RESTRUCTORING say? RESTRUCTORING says, do not now go and abuse those business owners based on the story in town concerning the business owners, right? So what I say is, there's a business law that goes hand in hand with this, and the business law for RESTRUCTORING ELISE, when I update that process and the business law with my opinion would be the right of the business owner in such a circumstance would be to be protected if their business owner's name is in conversation or in discussion or in argument in our generation. Then the business owner that is maybe an international business owner or any business owner that might be in any discussion, then the employees in his business are not allowed to disrespect or to disown the business owner in such a discussion or argument in our generation. The business owner then has a right of protection. His organization has a right to be protected, and the employees therefore in the organization has a right of protection, because they would then not put other employees in the business in danger. And such is the business law that has to be updated concerning the arguments that is happening in our generation. And we want really our law team to really focus on those businesses and on protecting the rights of those employees that is working. Because if people are starting to Instagram vote on businesses that is in countries that are now in arguments, that are now in war arguments, and countries are now abusing that situation, and they put other people that's employed in the offices in danger, then RESTRUCTORING ELISE and that, in my opinion, on the business law is, and how the business law should then be updated is that the business owners have the right to be protected. The employees that works for these businesses have the right to be protected, because not all of them are involved in these discussions, and not all of them has gone along to vote against the business owner, because the business owner, the story in town is now the business owner is now in argument with that country and with that country, because this one is a mafia and that one is a mafia, and then RESTRUCTORING ELISE says the whole world is a mafia. And therefore, do not put our countries in danger with abusive discussions or arguments and situations that no one knows about, because our business owners in that regard have a right to be protected. The businesses have a right to not be manipulated while their personal names are in discussion or are in argument in our generation. And that is where people come and knock on your door, and war stands by the front door. Why? Because no business owner have to be involved in being abused when his personal name is involved in the discussion and he owns the business in your country. So countries, I want to say, do not try and manipulate the guy's businesses. Do not try and be arrogant. Do not try and make treaties with other countries because you all now think this is the situation. I say that that business owner then has a right to then react upon what is going to be protected for their business. And these business owners are not going to disclose on how they're going to react. So what I want to educate our office teams of is that if you all are involved in working for businesses that is going through these discussions, then do not go and vote on those businesses. Do not go and say Instagram messages on those business owners. Do not go and stir more aggression in our generation, because there's already so much discussions happening in our generation, and we really do not want to abuse that. That is really not meant to be an abusive discussion. That is what I wanted to say today with regards to the business law that should be protecting the business owners in such a circumstance, because I've learned that not even the business law reacts in the circumstance. And there's a lot of international businesses in lots of countries, and there's a lot of conversations happening, and a lot of CEO bookings and bookkeepers that is not even updating information, and we do not know why, but we need business owners and CEOs and book companies and banks to really work along with these business owners in this season, and to really not have them more aggressive than they already are, because they're already in discussions concerning their businesses, and they're really maybe guilty or not guilty or not guilty or guilty, and we do not care because everyone in our generation is anyway so guilty. So what we are saying is that our banks that works with the funds of these business owners needs to have the law, the protective law, manage these business CEOs and manage the business managers, and they need to report directly to the bookkeeper of the bank in such circumstances. And we do not want to the whole time have people abuse the businesses, and people in our countries need to be educated about how to not get involved in these arguments that involves international business owners that are sometimes in discussion, or that are sometimes really having disagreements with one another. So that process is what I want. What I'm going to leave us at today is that I want our business law team to really manage that process for me, and to really not have Putin and China knock at everyone's doors to say, what are you all busy with South Africa? What is the discussions happening? What's happening? Because we have businesses that we have funded, we have built in those countries. What is happening? We really do not want to aggress people more. And it's not only them, but a lot of international business owners that are really now paranoid, because they really have businesses in certain countries, and they really do not want their businesses to be in any one of the discussions, because no one realizes what the discussions are. And the discussions are not that these guys are abusing. No, they are trying to manage our generation. They are busy with these processes, and they are not going to explain themselves to anyone. But what they are requiring for our countries is to not go and abuse them, and to not go and abuse their names. And all of these messages that everyone has been going along with on TikTok and Instagram, you're going to have to get over that, because the more you all aggress Putin is the more Zelensky is also going to go through this, because it now seems like it comes from Zelensky, and it's all of these arguments. And our people and our countries and in our countries would have to learn to know when to take a step back in circumstances like that, so that our generation and our office restructuring are not abused more, because these guys are now not only restructuring, but they're going to say, if you argue with us, then we start a war, and then we do this and this and that. And they're not even saying that, but they're really wanting to really have the process function, and the process in a proper way that is not going to be abusive, but they don't want everyone to the whole time argue with them, about what they are busy doing. So yeah, and they are really not aggressive, and they're really not aggressive in the situation. And we really believe that Putin and Zelensky would get over their argument, and we mentioned it, yes. We want them to really get into that is the discussion of the situation. And we don't want anyone to the whole time send information and hashtags around the world to vote on this one, then the one votes on Putin, then the one votes on Zelensky, and then everyone agrees the guys more. We really do not want that. So our people in our countries need to be educated in circumstances like war discussions and war arguments, so that no one can go and abuse the situation a little bit, and so that no one can find themselves stirring these guys with more aggression when they really had to be out of argument already. And what I want to have us also say with closing this discussion is that such is the restructuring that is now not only restructuring happening in the office, but there is the requirement for everyone to understand that this generation is busy with discussing a situation, and it is office environment, and it becomes an office discussion, because the way that an office is managed professionally, the way that it is these guys' intentions, that they really want to have the process managed in a way that is not going to be non-abusive to the other, and they're really not going to have to explain that to us the whole time, because according to them, we are educated and we need to know, how does a situation sense to us, and they can't still explain it to us the whole time. So therefore, that is that our generation do not have to abuse the situation, and do not abuse one another. Do not misinterpret these guys, because they are not really against the other. They're actually not really against the other. So what I do not want people to do is do not send hashtags around and voting around about these discussions, but allow these guys to get out of the argument so that they can really discuss these matters in a proper way. And that is all that I wanted to say today about HR 2023 office restructuring and RESTRUCTORING. ELISE. That's my opinion for today. I know I can always say a lot, but such is our generation. There's a lot happening, a lot that we can educate on, and if we are allowed, we would honestly educate properly. So let no one deprive no one of where they are required to be at in season. And that is where we are at. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for always listening to our discussions.